The story I also want to hit with you, and I guess this can close it out. The Pentagon reassessment by the Pentagon. I'm super curious on your take on this. So they are effectively putting this on Hegseth's desk, saying, and Eldridge Colby is, crying. I would imagine crying over his typewriter as he wrote this, effectively saying the Pentagon plans to prioritize the homeland over China and Russia, and that we need to lock down America, Fortress America, with our vassals in Europe, but for all intents and purposes, stop screwing with China, stop screwing with Russia, with a caveat, directly. Use your vassals, meaning use those vassal idiots in Europe. Use, Australia and South Korea and Japan, etc. But we don't want to be on this kind of direct exchange. That's the way I interpret it, by the way. But that's the way it sounds. You do it. We'll give you advice. You do it. Give me your take on this. Do you believe this? I mean, for the first question, do you even believe that the let's say the political inertia of this juggernaut of the United States is going to be able to turn on a dime with all of these neocons in Congress, all of these special interests, all of these other people who are hawks on China and hawks on the issue of Russia are going to be all of a sudden be like, okay, well, the Pentagon says we shouldn't be doing this. It's not in their best interest. So let's just focus on America. Do you buy the premise of this?
Okay, so first of all, this is an article that's being reported, and I already actually noticed and talked about this myself over the weekend on some other interviews, right? So the first thing I would say that this is not a new national security report. This is an article about what someone says are things that are being considered in this new national security report, right? It is rumors, essentially, at this point, right? Reporting, sure, but, we don't know for sure. Secondly, someone intentionally leaked this to Politico, right? So one of two reasons: either Hegseth desk or Colby's desk themselves, who are floating this to see what the reaction is before they finalize the document, or more likely someone within the blob, right? Someone within the foreign policy elite, the deep state, that has gotten wind of this and doesn't like it and is trying to draw attention to it in an attempt to combat it, right? To sink it before the document is actually released. We don't know which of those two it is, but we know that one of those two things happened. This is not the report itself. This is an intentional leak of the possible contents of that report before. And I believe that it is being considered, but again, until we get the final signed off changes in national security policy or intended changes. And your second point, right? This is obviously a minority within the Trump administration, right? Hegseth and Colby, may be the ones at the fore of this. And I agree with you, Colby was probably crying as he wrote it. But then I would still applaud him for his realism in following through on something that he, the reality of the situation via military capacity now of Russia and China, and recognizing reality, whereas so many other people in the U.S. and European governments and elsewhere are incapable of properly assessing military realities when it tells them things they don't want to hear, right? There was, after China's military parade last week, there was a report in Foreign Policy, a very anti-China publication in general, saying that China now has the military lead over the United States, and not just China, but in many ways Russia as well. And that's a reality that we may not like, but we have to, we can try to change that, right? But that's the situation now. So there is some people out there in the West that are still capable occasionally of recognizing reality and actually publishing it, right? That's what we have. But this will still be a minority within the Trump administration, and by far a minority within that juggernaut of the U.S. hegemon, right? The deep state, the Pentagon, the military-industrial complex, because there are a few American firsters within the Trump administration that have always been touting this line, and it appears, right, by the fact that this is actually being considered for a new Pentagon national security policy, tells us that they probably have Trump's ear at the moment. The moment, right? Because other people have had Trump's ears. I remember a Trump not too long ago that someone had his ear telling him that regime change shouldn't happen, that it wasn't a policy that the U.S. should pursue. And for 15 minutes in the Middle East, that was a big change in U.S. policy, right? We also had brief flirtations with regime change in Iran until someone brought home the fact, hey, we're going to, we can continue this, but we're going to get the snot beat out of us by Iranian missiles all across military bases in the U.S., and Israel is going to get hit even worse than we are. And then the regime change in Iran went out the door as well, right? The same things. We can, some combination, the Biden administration believed it could bring down the Russian government through a sanctions war, right, by provoking them into a conflict in Ukraine. That didn't work out so well for them. Then the Trump administration came in believing that they could, some combination of bluff and carrot and stick the Kremlin into accepting, freezing, ending the conflict, and preserving their proxy regime in Kiev on American terms. And that didn't work out so well for them, at least thus far. So then, there have been the people within the administration from the very beginning saying that China is the number one threat, and we absolutely need to dump Russia off on the Europeans, Iran off on the Israelis, and put everything military in the Pacific that'll float or fly, and do it yesterday. And now there's some other people within the administration that are looking across the Pacific and going, that parade, China's looking kind of buff. I don't know. That guy down there, Maduro, that ex-bus driver in Venezuela, he's looking a lot easier of a target, right? I mean, that's literally what's going on right now. So that is the current vein within multiple veins within this administration and within the deep state that have Trump's ear at the moment. Now, 15 minutes from now, that may not be the case, right? So I will point out again, we have heard multiple times before in the last half a year plus, right? Because it actually began before, of dramatic foreign policy changes and geopolitical posture shifts from within the Trump administration, and none of them have ever come to any type of reality. And there is so much impetus, right? So much mass behind the support of using Taiwan and using Ukraine and using Israel as proxies to wage hegemonic war against regional powers like Iran and great powers like Russia and China. It will be almost impossible for this handful of people within the White House that happen to have these particular geopolitical views of actually instituting those policies, even if they are published as this article suggests in a national security policy. I remain skeptical and cynical of this to a very large degree, but even let's say it is true and it can be instituted. It's certainly nothing good for the rest of the governments in the Western Hemisphere. It's nothing good for Venezuela or Brazil or Colombia or Mexico or any other leftist governments that, Cuba, anyone that entertains, in ideas of an independent foreign policy within that Western Hemisphere, because that will simply mean retrenchment and doubling down and a hyper imperialism just in a more concentrated space, which is, again, it plays to certain people within the Trump administration. Remember all that talk in the beginning about Greenland and making Canada the 51st state? That's the same group of people, right? Quite obviously. Yeah.
It's a Monroe doctrine.
They lost Trump's ear at some point, and now it
Have they?
appears that
Look at
well, they
Venezuela.
did.
Have they?
They oh no, they did at one point. They lost it, right? And then there was Ukraine, and China and Iran, and now we've come circle again, and those people have Trump's ear again for the moment right now. But again, 15 minutes from now, we don't know. This administration is absolutely consistent in the inconsistency and mercurialness of its policies.
It is not inconsistent to say America needs retrenchment on, let's say, North South America, while feeding your allies these other situations. Meaning,
sure,
this report is perfectly consistent with, hey, let's let Australia, South Korea, Japan, Philippines, let's let them deal with China. We'll give them advice, but let's let them deal with that. Let's let Europe deal with Russia. Let's let Israel deal with Iran. Those aren't inconsistent. It's still the U.S. entrenchment back here in the United States.
That's possible. The only thing is it would take even to a degree the immediate backing threat of a large, ready U.S. military force of backing up those proxies on the ground, which it is necessary to have in a, shall we say, a forward position at all times, under a hegemonic policy at, the 800 to 1,000 plus U.S. military bases around the world. Now, we keep hearing from the Trump administration, they're going to pull troops back from Europe. They're going to end military support programs for the Baltics, right? Everything like this. I'll believe it when I see it, right? When it has already happened is when I will believe it. And we actually see the Estonians crying about the results of it. Not that it's about to happen, but the results of it. That's when I will believe it, and not beforehand. Why? Because again, it is such a juggernaut. You're attempting to, divert the Titanic's course from the iceberg, but the Titanic isn't that easy to helm out of the way, particularly from the various lawn chairs on the deck, if you're not actually the one in control of the bridge of the ship.
Part of me took it as somebody said, hey, this will be suicidal. And by the way, this report was written probably before the Chinese military parade. It had to be some kind of sober assessment of, we will lose. We would be forced to go to nuclear war. We are not going to.
There have been multiple Pentagon war games of a fight against China in the Taiwan Straits in the South China Sea that show the U.S. losing, right?
Exactly.
Like everyone, right? Yeah, and there are still people in denial of that, even within the Pentagon, right? But that is already what even the U.S.'s own war games are showing. So it would not be illogical to accept that. It's just, it also becomes ideological and narrative, right? Because people don't want to accept that, just like they don't want to accept that Russia has won or is winning the conflict in Ukraine. And there are, again, I hate to always bring this up, but there were people who didn't want to accept a U.S. big L in Syria and never did. And at the end of the day, they found their way to some, A, B, C, D acceptable level of victory with an undoubted Russian and Iranian defeat in Syria, even though they had won on the battlefield. So never, ever let your guard down and never underestimate the American enemy and its, capacity for achieving victory or at least ashes over the battlefield over their opponents.
It's like burning everything down. I guess one catch though. I mean, China industrial capacity is not getting worse. I mean, that's the rub. Russia's industrial capacity is not getting worse. Both
not at the moment. But 10 years down the road, we don't know where those economies are going to take us. Black swans do happen.
I accept that. I don't get. Yes, I accept that. That's 10 years though. I can't see around corners, right? I'm just pointing out that China's
I don't know. The
industrial base.
Chinese government can. They plan 50, 100 years in advance, right? The Russians are at least 5, 10 years thinking ahead, right? If we can think 5 years, 1 to 5 years ahead, I think we're doing good, right?
Yeah. I guess I just don't see. It seemed like all of this talk about 2027 had to do with we need to keep China from getting out the barn, and in 2027 they're going to be out the barn. Personally, I thought that was already behind us. I thought they were already out the barn in regards to, if you look at their industrial base, industrial capacity, the mechanism that they use for their war fighting and all this other stuff. I took it as somebody is acknowledging reality. And in doing so, it's trying to, hey, why don't we hit these countries that don't have nukes? They don't have a massive industrial base. Do you think this is still going to bring these countries at odds, though? I mean, China has, I think a large part of the issue with Venezuela is let's say, the relationship with China and Russia and Venezuela, and this idea that Venezuela can now exploit more oil and that type of stuff.
I just saw that China just completed some floating oil platform in Venezuela over the weekend, Precisely. Right? There's a lot of investment, Russia and China, economic, but also geopolitical investment in Venezuela. But neither China nor Russia have the military capacity to defend Venezuela in the other side of the world, in the Western Hemisphere, against the U.S. if it is really set on. And what I see off of Venezuela's coast right now is not a military invasion force, right? It is not, right? 4,000 Marines are not going to do the job, no matter how fragile you may believe the Venezuelan government and military are. That's still not enough. Now, right. If the goal is to launch a bunch of tomahawks and some airstrikes and blow up some stuff and declare victory and go home, which is entirely within the Trump administration's playbook, right, of looking for another big PR win, right? That is possible. And it is also possible that invasion force may be increased, right, into something that is really capable of regime change in Venezuela. It all becomes very difficult right now, much more difficult than it was during Trump's first administration, where people who were paying attention will remember there was a very Keystone Cops attempt at regime change in Venezuela that went catastrophically wrong. I think I heard Bay of Piglets tossed around at the time. But at that time, the Colombian government was right-wing, pro-U.S., and anti-Venezuela. The Colombian government now, right, the government that any attacks on Venezuela would almost certainly have to be launched from, right, is leftist and more pro-Venezuela than it is anti-Venezuela. So that is a severe limitation for the moment that needs to be recognized for any actual U.S. military attempt. Also, we have previously seen big protest movements, insurgent movements supported by the West, the Juan Guaidos and the far more violent aspects of that on the ground in Venezuela. But that's not happening right now, right? Something like that would take months to fully activate it, even if it, that is the intent here. That would make a military scenario easier if the government was already being destabilized from within. And that would be an indication that there was regime change intent. But I don't see that happening right now. That's why I'm very skeptical about the seriousness of all this noise about Venezuela right now as well. I wonder how much of this isn't a deliberate policy of foreign policy distraction. Don't look at what we're doing over there, not following through on what many people want on Ukraine or something like that. Pay more attention to all of this bluff and bluster about Venezuela right now. That is, I believe, within the thinking policy strategy of the Trump administration. Of
Wag the dog.
Yeah, well, no, not wag the dog, just big foreign policy distraction, right?
But at the core of wag the dog, that was a distraction, right? It's
well,
this Bill
depending
Clinton,
on which side, whether you're the tail or the dog, right?
Right, right. Okay, let me ask you this, and this is pretty close. Do you think that in Trump's heart of hearts, deep down heart of hearts, that for all intents and purposes, he would want to close the war out? He just wants to be able to say,
I don't know. I'm not going to try to psychoanalyze Trump anymore. I think that's a fool's game. He changes his opinion every 15 minutes, depending on who he talked to last. And I think it's irrelevant.
It's not, because it depends on if the Russians think that Donald Trump may want to save face in some way. Because that okay, go ahead. Make your point. Make your point. I'm sorry. Make your point. Make your point.
If the rest of the juggernaut can't be turned, then it doesn't make any difference what Trump really wants in his, gold lame heart of hearts. And I don't believe that anything is written in Donald Trump's heart of hearts, other than how much he likes lucrative real estate deals, right? I don't believe that anything. I think the man is extremely capable of absolute sincerity about something and having absolute sincerity about 100 degrees the opposite 15 minutes later.
Right. It's like I strongly, passionately believe this thing, and now I
don't think Trump strongly, passionately believes anything.
Then why are the Russians continuously playing this game with them?
Because they're playing a game. It's a diplomatic game. It could bear fruit. It costs very little. It also keeps countries like Brazil and India on side.
Fair enough. I agree with you. I think part of the reason that they're also keeping deaths down, I should say, is for the same argument of, we want this multipolar world. We don't believe in the destruction of nations. And if you kill a lot of people in a mass event, you kind of kill this argument of we are better, we are morally. Yeah. So, Mark, you're fantastic, man. You give fantastic breakdowns. You're the best in the business. I say it, and I don't say it just to put on airs. I think the audience knows I'm pretty transparent. If I like somebody, I like them. If I dislike them, I dislike them. Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. You can follow Mark on Twitter at Mark Sleboda1. You can find him on The Real Politic with Mark Sleboda on Boosty, Boosty. Check out his Patreon. Like I said, best in the business.
That is a Patreon. That is a sanctions-proof Patreon.
Oh, Boosty, I'm sorry.
Follow me on Patreon because I don't have a Patreon page.
Boosty, thank you, Mark. I'm sorry, Boosty, Boosty. Follow him on Boosty, Real Politic.
It is like Patreon.
Yeah. It is like Patreon. Thank you, Mark. I'm sorry. You be safe, man. You have a good day, okay?
Thanks.
All right. And Mark is fantastic. And yes, it's Boosty, Boosty. Definitely check him out. Definitely subscribe to his channel. Best in the business. And I mean that in all sincerity. Look, there are a few channels that I really, really like. Carl Jha, he's one of them. Mark, easily one of them. Jeff Rich, I actually like Jeff Rich. I'm a fanboy of Jeff Rich channel, the Burning Archive. But Mark, best in the business. He doesn't get the credit he deserves, and his analysis has been bar none. As Mark would say, there are some people who are cheerleaders who you could go to in order to feel good, and then you can come here, listen to him, and get the straight shooting, of what's actually taking place. There is a rumor that he is on other channels. I don't know if that rumor is to be true. I do know, as a flat fact, he comes here, and he is fantastic when he comes. So definitely check him out. Definitely support his content. Definitely support his work.